When we have a camera converted to shoot infrared images, the infrared filter in front of the sensor is removed and a visible light blocking filter is put in its place. You can choose different levels of that filter. So some people choose to have a filter that allows some visible light through, which introduces colour into their infrared images. When I had my own camera converted, I chose to have a light blocking filter replaced over the sensor so that most of the visible light is extracted. So I get more of the infrared light in my images. I was looking for the high impact monochrome images that I remember from my film days. But of course, from time to time, we like a little bit of variety, a little bit of artistic license, so to speak, to add a bit of colour. Well, we can easily tone images in the digital world, as you're probably already aware. We have duotone techniques we can apply in Camera Raw. We can even introduce an image with hand colouring, and perhaps we'll have a look at that a little later. Now here I've opened up an infrared image which I quite like, just taking off that saturation. Now this was shot on a very bright, hot Australian day, sometime around midday I think, if my memory serves me correct. And you can see if you look up at the top right, the shutter speed was 125th of a second at f8. So once again, very consistent with what we were speaking about in an earlier video. And if we needed any proof again of how well infrared handles contrast, here we have a pretty good example of it. So what we're going to do here is just quickly manipulate this image, because I don't think we're going to need to do a great deal. And then we'll take a little look at duotone and maybe one or two other tones in Photoshop. Now you'll see quite a familiarity with the procedure I've used so far. If we look up at the histogram, we can see that on the dark tones it looks pretty good. Nothing is stacked up on the left hand side, but we seem to be deficient in light tones. So let's step the whites across quite a bit, and there we bring a lot of sparkle into the image. I've got the clipping warning here checked up on the top right, and if you look very carefully around that piece of ironwork there, you can see we're just losing the detail on the top and on the edge. Insignificant, but it is telling me that we're using a really good spread of tones here. But of course we can see that with the histogram. Not only have we got the histogram spread nicely from left to right, but it peaks nice and high as well. But of course we can see that in the image we're looking at. We are looking at an image that's a little brighter in the top left corner, so perhaps we can do something about that with either our adjustment brush or our graduated filter. So I'm going to pick up my graduated filter, click up at the top and drag down, and it's picking up a nice bit of tone there. So I'll just turn this around. Sometimes it can get tricky turning this around. Don't forget you can go up to each end and you get a little double-headed arrow appear, and it does make it sometimes easier to rotate to get this in the perfect position you need. And also don't forget you can always touch the V key, which removes that overlay but leaves it there and working. I'll double click the exposure and it'll go back to where we started. So that's what we're trying to fix up at the top left. So now without the overlay in place, we often get a better idea of how far we need to go. I think I'd like a little bit more clarity up there as well, maybe a bit more contrast, something to just balance it with the rest of the image. And I'm liking what I see. If anything, I may want to put a gradient down the bottom, just a small one, just to darken that bottom edge to match the top a little bit, give the image a nice strong base to sit on. So with the gradient tool selected again, I'm just going to click and drag up from the bottom. Now you can see that it's already remembered the fact that we've touched the V key, so I'll hit the V key again, and at least we can see where the pin is. I only want it to come up a little way, and I don't want to do too much here, so on this occasion I'll reset all the changes we made in the other gradient because I don't want the same settings here. I just want a little bit of darkening in that foreground. You can see what I'm looking for. Just a little bit to push us up into the picture. And I think that's probably about as far as I want to go. Just going to turn it a little bit, maybe to match up with the slant of that timber. But I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing. Now I said earlier on in this video that something in this image appeals to me. And sometimes I think it's worthwhile just to take a few seconds to discuss what that is, because what makes a good picture is a vital skill that we have to learn. Just purchasing an infrared camera isn't enough, of course. We still need to find good, interesting subjects and choose the right viewpoint and get the exposure pretty good. Well, I think one of the things that helps this image is the low viewpoint. It gives the row of old railway stuff there up on the upper right a degree of power in the image. But if I pick up the crop tool and drag out the rule of thirds, we can see that this piece of railway memorabilia looks like a lever to change the points, is nicely positioned on one of the strongest parts of the image where those two cross lines meet. We have a sort of a natural interest running down the top third line, and in addition to that we've got the railway lines actually bending in, almost reaching that third line as well. So from a compositional and interest point of view, I think the image has got quite a bit going for it, and of course because of the way infrared copes with contrast, we've got a good range of interesting tones there too. But let's try pushing the boat out a little bit and adding some colour. Now I'm not sure there's any exact science to applying duotones, which is what we're going to do next. And what I tend to do is I take a suck it and see sort of approach. I try some tones and accept what I feel is adding something to the image. The duotones are here. The actual tab is called Split Tonings, and when I open it up you can see I've got the ability to change the hue for the highlights and the shadows and of course the saturation, and then I can balance the two. So if I want to bias one colour against another, I can use the centre slider. So it's all trial and error. So let's apply the trial and hope we don't get too much error. I tend to start myself by just pushing up the saturation, because if we don't, we can move the hue as much as we like and we can't see anything. So I normally stick it up halfway just to give me an idea of the colour that I'm selecting. And as you can see, as we move the hue along, we're going to go through those range of colours. Now I remember this is a very hot day, certainly 32 degrees I think, crawling around this old railway yard, so I'm going to stay with that warm colour for the highlights, but perhaps not quite as much saturation as that. I think most of these colours need to be fairly delicate. Now I'm going to do the same with the saturation. I won't go up too far because I want to give myself an idea of how it's going to look with a slightly different colour, maybe a cooler colour. But what I can do, I can move across the hue here until I see something which I find appealing. Now I quite like when we move in towards the green, we're getting a sort of a very unusual look in the old railway yard, but we can come back to this point, so let's continue. Now that's what I had in mind, something like a blue, but perhaps that's a bit heavy. So let's drop that down. Maybe I can bring the saturation of the warm tones up, saturation of the blues up. You can see what I mean when I said trial and error. All I'm doing is making the changes while looking at the picture and stopping when I see something that has appeal. Now a good thing to do, I would suggest, is once we've got a nice colour, perhaps we could log that colour and continue looking, because if we settle on the first duotone we choose, who knows, we may miss something better. Now, of course, it wouldn't be too difficult, would it, to memorize or make a note of these settings, but we can do better than that. I think if we go to this option here, the little tooltip has just appeared, we can take a snapshot. So I'm going to take a snapshot of this by clicking the icon down here. We get the opportunity to name this, so I'll just call it Rail 1, that'll do, and click OK. Going back to my duotones, I'm going to continue and have a look at something else. Let's, for example, shut off the shadows for a moment. Let's bring this back to a green colour. And then we've got something there straight away that has a certain sort of look about it, doesn't it? Now, we're all going to choose something slightly different here in relation to the hue and the saturation, but I don't find that unattractive either. It sort of fits in with the old railway theme. So you can see what I mean. I could take another snapshot here, if I can say it, and we can try for another duotone. But I think out of the two, I quite like this one best. But just in case, let me make another snapshot. Rail 2. So now all we've got to do is to just switch between the two. There's my favourite. I'm going to open this up into Photoshop. Now remember, when we open up an image from Adobe Camera Raw, it will remember the settings we applied, and I'm using the Smart Object status here, so I can always go back into Camera Raw. If I look at the tones that I've applied here and I change my mind tomorrow, well, I can double click. I can be straight back into Adobe Camera Raw. I can go back to the duotones. There's all of the settings. So if I felt the need to drop the saturation down and reapply it, I've got all of those options. So it's a good idea to save this image as a smart object, as a Photoshop file now, so we can always come back to this in the future. Now, I'm always offering advice that you should leave yourself an escape route back to earlier versions of the image you're working on, at least for a few days until you're finally happy with the work you've done. For the simple reason is, so many times we do something on Monday which we're happy with, delirious in fact, and we look at the image again on Wednesday and suddenly it doesn't look quite so wonderful. It's always nice to have that escape route to be able to go back, make a slight change and be back with the image. In this case I would probably save a monochrome version too. But at the moment, looking at the image, I quite like the colours here. I think it's in keeping with the content and it's working remarkably well. Here's another infrared image which was very easy to manipulate to this standard. Probably took less than 1 minute using the techniques we've already looked at a few times now. Now, back in my darkroom days when I was producing images under an enlarger through the chemical process, we used to purchase different types of paper. Some of those papers were a cool paper and some were a warm paper, and the trick was to try to match the paper type to the image you was producing to help the subject matter and the appeal of the picture. Well, we can do the same thing, of course, using the tones in Photoshop, if we just use them very subtly. Of course, we don't have to. If we wanted a sepia tone here, it's pretty easy to achieve. Let's do that first by bringing up the hue and saturation palette. You'll find that in the image menu, but Control U is a good shortcut. Once it appears on screen, a good sepia tone guide is to tick the colorize box, use something like 24, 25 in the hue, and then drop the saturation down to suit. I usually find something around 6 or 7 suits me quite well, and there, within a few seconds, we've got quite a nice sepia tone. Of course, if we only wanted the sepia tone coming through the building, then we may choose to use an adjustment layer, hue and saturation. There's the colorize box, same palette, looks a little different, but it's exactly the same. So again, 24, 25, something like 6 in the saturation. There we have the sepia tone. Now if I just get rid of this box for a moment and come back to my adjustment layer and my mask, of course what we've got here is exactly the same as we had before. We've got the whole thing, which is sepia tone. So let's look at the fact we have black as our foreground colour. We have the mask selected in our layers. So if I flood that mask with black, Alt backspace, what we've effectively done is applied a sepia tone and then took it all away with the mask, which means we can now switch to white. I call this reverse masking, but I'm not sure that's the correct term for it, but it's as good as any. What I can now do is spray white onto my mask to reveal the sepia tone just on the house. I'm not going to do that on this occasion, just a quickie, just to give you a feel for how it's done. But there I have it with a little bit of colour coming through. We would enlarge the image, of course, and we would take a bit more colour, but that gives you a feel for a partial sepia tone within the infrared landscape. Now back into my layers to get rid of this, and one of the pluses of having an adjustment layer, of course, is what we've just been talking about, having an escape route back to be able to make a change. So if I wanted to change and look at this as a blue tone, you can see I can make those changes pretty easily when we're using an adjustment layer. But for now it's going in the bin, and I'm going to bring up the hue and saturation again. Because if we want a very cool black and white, if we tick the colorize box, push the saturation up quite high, and bring your slider along in the hue box until you get the color blue you want. The reason I like the saturation well up is because we can go too far and we start to move towards mauve, as you can see there. So coming back to that blue color there, now I can drop the saturation right down. And now you can see what I mean about having a cold looking black and white. Great for winter landscapes sometimes. And if I tick the colorize box, you can see the difference between the original black and white and that very, very delicate tone. And it is delicate, and it's not until we turn it on and off that you tend to notice it. And of course, what level we actually settle on is going to be personal. And of course we've got the reverse of that, the warm tone, something down there, and again we bring this well down, but we just lift it very, very slightly. It's almost a sepia. Maybe we could try a different colour up the end, but I think it amounts to much the same thing. But certainly a very delicate saturation, and when I turn the colorize on and off, there's the standard black and white, and there's our warm black and white, and perhaps even that could go even lower to something like 2. Something as delicate as that, but it still makes a difference. So when it comes to how we apply colour, our software gives us pretty quick and easy ways to do that. I suppose the hardest part is picking the right colour. This again was another one of those very hot days. I can almost feel the heat as I stood at a fence taking this shot, but perhaps it may be one of those that would lend itself to a pale green colour. Let's just take a look to finish up. There's the saturation. Let's find the green we're looking for. We can have it slightly towards yellow, that wouldn't hurt, but let's pick the green there and then take the saturation down so we've just got just a tiny hint. Nothing much, most things work when they're delicate, and let's finish on that.